It's like you've been with the people they've been with in a way.
Oh
Like,
shit. Oh,
you know what I
absolutely.
mean? Like who they've been with and they've been with the people you've been with. I mean, it's kind of like, to me, it makes it all the more complicated. And
And messy.
yeah,
Messy.
messy, and also it's more heartbreaking because you're young and vulnerable and you just
Hmm.
think so much because you've done this act. Now you feel like you're grown and you feel like, oh, we in love, and
Mm.
that it didn't mean that much to him. Welcome, everyone, to the Linda B Show. Thank you all for joining me here today. We have a topic to discuss today, and that is sex. How important is it in a relationship? Before we get into this video, don't forget to smash that like button, comment, share, subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and hit all notifications so that you are always alerted of when I drop a new video. I have two special guests to discuss this topic. I have joining me today Renee, Suzanne, and we have Derek. All right. Thank you guys for joining me.
Thank
Yeah,
you
no
for
problem.
having
Thanks for
us.
having me.
Thank you. So, I want to ask you, Renee, what is the name of your YouTube channel so my audience can follow you?
It's exactly like it's written on the screen there with
Okay.
the dash in between. So Renee dash Suzanne.
Okay.
There is another Renee Suzanne. So
Oh,
we have to have the dash.
have to have the dash, guys. Remember
Yeah.
that. And Derek, tell us about your channel.
So you can find me at Scarlet Arrow Family.
Scarlet Arrow Family. I really like
Yeah.
that name. Thank you guys so much. Okay, so we're going to just jump right into this, and it is about sex. I figured we're all adults here. We have a little experience in this on this topic.
Yeah.
And so my question is sex. How important is it in a relationship? And then we're going to get into some deeper aspects because we all know sometimes when you get into sexual relationships, it can bring up insecurities, how often do you do it or not do it, and all sorts of
Mhm.
things. So Renee, I'm going to ask you, what would you say about sex? Just off the top of your head, what comes to you first?
Um, well, first I was raised um to save sex for marriage,
Hmm.
and that I did do.
Hmm.
Um, I am divorced and remarried, so I've had two marital relationships. And I was never taught that sex was just for procreating. I mean, it wasn't just about kids. It was about intimacy and expressing love, and um,
Hmm.
it was not something to be ashamed of, but it wasn't something to flaunt outside of your relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I gotta say that I'm raising my daughters to do that. They're in their early young 20s. And I'm
Okay.
like, they haven't done anything, not to my knowledge. And I'm raising them to wait because I feel like it brings complications. And if it doesn't work out, you might be more emotionally tied to that person.
Sure.
Maybe you don't see red flags that were there because now you're so, I don't know, it brings a certain level of intimacy that makes you think that you might be in a relationship that is more committed than the other person might be committed. You might be more
Right.
emotionally invested than they are because of
Right.
that. But what do you say, Derek?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of raised the same way. I did not wait. I've also had a failed marriage and then remarried and happily married now. From
Mhm.
my first marriage, we actually got pregnant before we got married, and that led to our marriage. And my wife and I now, we raised her since third grade. She just got married in June, and she did
Oh,
wait until she was married. And I
oh, that's
like yeah, it's like it's worked out just perfectly.
Hmm.
Um, but setting aside my own life experiences as a parent raising a daughter, um, confidence and self-worth, and like the way I explained to her through junior
Mhm.
high and high school was you know, when you hold hands for the first time, when you kiss for the first time,
Mm,
the next person that you meet in your life's journey, you're like, well, I like this person just a little bit more, so I want to give just a little bit more of myself to them. And
mm,
before long, you've given all of yourself, and there's got to be something to give that one person that you're wanting to spend the rest of your life with, and that's the one thing you're in control of that makes it a special thing. So that worked out for them, and I've got 2 more kids. We'll see how that works out.
uh,
Well,
are
yeah,
they?
yeah. What were you going to
Are
say?
they? I was just going to ask, are they girls too, or do you have
I've got
boys?
1 boy and 1 girl. My son's 11, my daughter's 9, and she's a little
Oh,
fireball. So we will see what happens with
Well,
that.
I'm sure you're doing a great job.
I feel to say that I have 4 children total, 3 from my first marriage that I had very young. I got married at 19 the first time. Um, and I had them very close together. And after getting divorced, my husband now and I have been married 21 years, and we have 1 child together.
Mhm.
Um, he's a very complex, medically fragile young man. He was 20 now. We actually spent our first anniversary in the NICU, even though he was conceived after.
Oh,
um, yeah. So he's our forever Peter Pan. You know, he'll never grow up. He's always going to be with us.
okay.
So, but that no, and not to put a Debbie Downer on
Oh, yeah, no,
anything,
no, no, no.
but there's just no more teaching about
About
sex
6 right there.
for
Right.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to admit that I did not wait until I was
Mm.
married. It would have been nice because I feel like when you enter into those types of relationships, when you have sex before you're married, and of course, more than likely, I was very young, I was in high school, you probably more than likely are not going to marry any of those people. And
Hmm.
you've gotten what we call soul ties, which is like a really strong emotional connection,
Yeah.
even though the relationship did not work out. And it's almost like you get with someone else. It's like, I don't know how I want to word this. It's like you've been with the people they've been with in a way. Like,
Oh shit. Oh,
you know what
absolutely.
I mean? Like who they've been with and they've been with the people you've been with. I mean, it's kind of like, to me, it makes it all the more complicated. And
And messy.
yeah,
Messy.
messy, and also it's more heartbreaking because you're young and vulnerable and you just
Hmm.
think so much because you've done this act. Now you feel like you're grown and you feel like, oh, we in love, and
Mm.
that it didn't mean that much to him,
Right.
so just being
Nowadays, I remember even when my older boys, they were in high school, one of them was extremely frank about talking about sex
Mhm,
or anything.
mhm.
The other one would, we didn't even know if he liked a girl or anything. Um, but the older one, he was very clear and very straightforward how much girls have taken over being in
Oh,
charge
oh,
of how things kind of progress in
mm,
a relationship. And if boys don't, let's say, you know, go along with whatever it is, then they get accused of being homosexual or other things like that. And so it's kind of, where it used to be boys would embarrass girls for,
mhm, mhm.
having sex before marriage. At least in the earlier 2010s to the teens, 2015, 2016. Yeah, girls, yeah, you have to watch out for the girls just as much as you do the
That's so
boys.
crazy. You might be a
Yeah.
Christian guy trying to live according
Mhm.
to the Christian principles, and
Mhm.
that's to me another enemy tactic. Then they'll be tempted to prove that they're not gay, right?
Sure.
And go
Right.
Yeah.
things to show,
Right.
hey, I'm not that way, because
Right.
a straight guy does not want to be accused of that. I'm just saying.
Oh, no, once it happens, I'm sure, Derek, right? Once it's said, every guy believes it and every girl.
I'll show you. That's kind of the
That's what
mentality.
I'm saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I'll show you I'm not that way, and then
Yeah.
that'll be the one that gets somebody pregnant. It's like,
Yeah.
Yep.
Uh,
yeah.
I told all my kids, I said, nope, not only should you not do it before you get married for X number, of reasons, I
Mhm.
am not your built-in babysitter. You are going to finish high school. You're going to go to college if you're going to go to college. I am not.
Uh-huh.
I'm raising you guys. I'm not raising my grandkids.
I know, right? So what do you say about that, Derek? What did you see any evidence of that with your, do you have sons?
Mm. I've got one son, but he's in fifth grade, so I'm
Oh,
not really there yet. But with my oldest, no, I mean, she's very driven. Like she wrote her first album in her freshman year of high school, released it on iTunes. Like
Oh,
she
wow.
has a list of goals and she reaches for them. And so like when you give her an explanation in depth of why you need to wait and why it's
Hmm.
important and what that means for your relationship and eventually your marriage, she's
yep.
like, okay, that makes sense. So she didn't
Mhm.
really
Yep.
wasn't
That's
really
Yep.
great.
tempted.
That's great. That's great to have that.
Yep.
And and you may not realize it, but if you're like a really good dad, but you seem like you are, and you have that masculine protector quality and you spend
Yeah.
quality time, that is going to have a priceless effect on her life.
Hmm.
That's going to
Yeah.
really mean something.
It starts setting
Yes.
expectations of what her husband should
Hmm.
be doing for their
Exactly.
relationship as well as for their children also. So
Exactly.
Right.
So she's more than likely going to be fine because one thing I've noticed, those masculine men that are there are present, their
Hmm.
children just turn out better.
yeah.
They just turn out a lot better.
Oh yeah, balanced, right? Like
Yeah, exactly.
they've had that motherly feminine
Yeah, then you
influence,
got the
and then they've had that masculine
yeah,
fatherly
exactly.
influence.
So let's talk about, do you think sex before marriage makes things more complicated? So you waited, Derek and I did.
But that's honestly, I will admit to um seeing everybody else though. Like
Okay.
it seemed like all my friends,
Uh-huh.
both of my sisters,
Mhm.
actually, and they were pregnant and having babies just after they turned 17 and 18.
Okay.
So I learned honestly a lot in my life, including this, by what not to do.
You looked at them and said, okay, I'm not doing that.
Yes, well, yeah, well, taught not to, and then this is what happens, you
Yeah.
know, when
Mhm.
you do, and yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
Mm.
It makes sense. But what do you say, Derek, about sex before marriage making things more complicated?
It adds another layer to relationships that is not necessary. And
Mhm.
if you can it it I just think that it would make marriage a lot simpler if you didn't have the layers of emotion tied to other people.
Right.
There's so many aspects that's beyond risk of
Mhm.
pregnancy and other things that are
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
sure.
why you should wait.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, we've
I
got other things involved, but yeah, like
Yeah.
you say, the emotional ties to other people, and sometimes people don't realize it. I don't not saying that any of us did this, but somebody has done this where they unintentionally might compare their
Oh,
current relationship to another relationship. As far as sex goes, you don't want to leave that door open.
Yeah.
well, I mean, we're human, and I think we do a lot of comparing with
Mhm.
other people when we shouldn't. It's not to anyone's benefit. We're all individual people, but I think sometimes people can't help but do that, and
Mhm.
then yeah, that would complicate things.
Mhm.
And when you're talking about emotional ties, um, I honestly feel that you're giving,
Mhm.
you are giving over this part of yourself.
Yes.
And so if you were to have sex with somebody before marriage and it doesn't work out for whatever reason,
Right.
you've both given part of yourself to each other
Mhm.
that you don't get back.
Right.
You
Right.
don't get that back. That will always be the first memory. That will always be, you know, the
That's true.
building block from where you kind of step off from. And
Mhm.
yeah, and I just think it incredibly complicates things.
And Derek, I want to ask you, as the only man here,
Mhm.
have you ever been in a situation where it broke? You had a relationship where you were sexual, and you guys broke up for whatever reason, and you felt something that really made it hard for you to deal with it when, especially when it came to another relationship? Was there any comparison? Was there anything emotionally left over from the previous relationship?
Maybe I mean, men handle it differently than women, and there's more of a disconnect. So
Yeah, I think so
I
too.
don't know if the carryover was there. Maybe some comparisons and way things are done or handled that may carry over, but
Mhm.
Mhm.
not like it just difference probably the right word between male and female as far as how that carryover happens.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I mean it adds that extra layer of complexity that
Mhm.
it's not clean. And then so like then you're thinking
Right.
of as far as the separation when relationships
Mhm.
end, there's never just a clean break. There's
Right.
in your mind, and kind of goes back to what you were saying about comparisons, like
Mhm.
Mhm.
humans in general, whether it's finances or success at work or relationships, like you're always, the
Comparing.
more that we're being stimulated by all these people all over the place, you're comparing
Mhm.
yourself to their situation. And as you mature, you can celebrate other people's successes. Well, as you're younger, you're like, man, why can't I get a new car? Why can't I
Mhm.
get the job
Mhm.
that I always want? There's a little
Right.
bit of delay in all that.
Mhm. And I think it's built also in the anatomy. We're adults here.
Mhm.
Men are the givers in a sexual relationship, and I think women receive because of how we're
Mhm.
built. And
Okay.
so I think women are more emotionally attached when that takes place, when the act of
Okay.
sex takes place. I think that that's true. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, or how you feel is concerning that.
I can see what you're saying.
Hmm.
Um, because I mean, in the sense that you're talking anatomy wise,
Hmm.
then it, but that to me then would be part of that energetic, part where you're giving over.
Hmm.
It's the giving and the receiving.
Yep. Yep.
So
Hmm.
yeah, I
I think
think
it's one of those things that a lot of times we look at, there's a line and you're either this way or you're the other way, but in reality there's really a spectrum to so many different things. Like so,
Yes.
right.
like
Yeah.
there's women that can be extremely masculine and extremely
Yep.
feminine, and there's
Oh,
the same thing for men. So if you're comparing and contrasting each specific relationship, the spectrum of that
right,
relationship is different. So
Hmm.
right.
there's there's a lot of giving and taking that would be different depending on the intimacy of that relationship and how it affects it.
Yeah.
Wow. And
And well,
so, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
oh, it's
Renee.
okay. I was just going to say that being divorced and having two marriages, um, the um, temptation to compare or whatever would still be there. Um, but like you said, there's so many differences, Derek. It's a spectrum of relationships and stuff too. My first marriage was, 11 years and three children, and my husband is uh, divorced as well, but his first marriage was his high school sweetheart, and then it only lasted 2.5 years after, into marriage.
Hmm.
And so we have a lot. We actually very frankly talk and
Hmm.
have talked several times about the actual sexual relationships we had
Mm. Oh,
before.
wow.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and honestly compare him, and he's more of an emotional guy probably than most.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm probably more of a logical kind of girl than
Than
most.
most. So that's interesting, for you guys to
Mhm,
be able to have that conversation like that.
mhm.
'Cause I'm pretty sure most couples do not do that.
Oh yeah,
I
I know
don't.
the intimate details.
Wow, intimate details. Well, I don't even think I
Mhm,
want to know. That's just me. But
mhm.
I think that's interesting. Wow. And how did that help you guys? I mean, do you feel like it helped you?
Um, I do
Okay.
because they were actually so very, very different.
Okay.
And, um, there were some adjustments, you
Mhm.
know, mentally, emotionally, that both sides had to make,
Mhm.
um, because of what we were used to previously.
Mhm.
And the feelings that were there previously that
Mhm.
are compared to what we felt with each other.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, no, honestly, very, very frankly, I think I asked a lot of the questions. That's how I ended up with a lot of the information. I
Wow.
asked a
To
lot of
me,
the questions.
to me, that's a great relationship because to feel comfortable with being able to just ask that, and then this person's giving you all the information. I
Mhm.
mean, and I just got to be honest. I don't even want to know. You know, and if I just that was then. I don't want to know. I'm just being honest. I still
Leave
don't
the
know.
past in the past.
Yeah, just leave it back there. I don't want to know. But but switching gears a little bit, we're all married, right? I've been married. I just
Mhm.
celebrated my 24th wedding anniversary, February 3rd. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And so
Yeah.
as far as marriage goes, how, you know, since we adults here, I feel like we get busy and we don't do the deed, have sex as often as we would like because we're busy, we're tired, things going on, helping other family members with things. Do you all find that that happens in your relationship? You want to go first, Derek?
Oh yeah. It definitely does. I think well, and then comfort level and all I mean, like to me, I don't care if the kids are home. I don't care if we've got people spinning over, staying in other rooms in the house. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter to me, but it
yeah.
does bother my wife. So
Oh, it
there's
Mhm.
does.
it's it comes down to communication
Yeah.
and not making like not feeling pressure but making it natural. So
Yes.
there's so it can be complex, but in reality to me it comes down to communication. If you get
Mhm.
upset or frustrated because of lack or not because it's happening as regular, then
Mhm.
that comes down to you guys just need to sit down and talk about it. I mean,
Exactly.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, don't go around like, and some people, not us, but some people will go out and commit adultery. They'll
Right.
cheat rather than sit down and explain. The other person might be going through some emotional things at work
Right.
or health
Right.
issues, whatever the issue is. Sit down and talk, and don't just go out there and make a mess. And when all it took was a conversation, you
It's
know.
still got it's still I think it's still, even as much as it's not a taboo conversation, and it seems to be, I mean, I grew up where I honestly, I feel like I grew up very, very sheltered because until I met my husband now, I was not aware of how much, how pervasive sex and sexuality and whatever is in, television, movies,
Oh yeah. Oh,
jokes between adults, and,
it's
I mean,
everywhere.
it's and I had no idea. I really had no idea. And so I just, I think that complicates things.
Hmm.
Um, but there's always that beginning, in the earlier, the first however many years that are different as time goes by too.
Yeah.
Um, and like, I think like Derek said too, there's that level of comfort that you feel with each other, and people can get very complacent about,
Yeah.
whatever's happening, and they don't want to talk about it. They just let it happen. However, they just let things slide too.
You have to be intentional. You
Yeah.
have to be very intentional. You have to
yeah.
work at it. We can get tired and I honestly lazy when it comes to that particular area and just
Mhm.
assume that the other person is okay. We have to sit down and be able to talk
Mhm.
about it because we probably should do it more here. But I'm like you, Derek. I don't care who's in the house, as long as the door's locked and we don't make too much noise. I can't because we live with other people anyway. I'm like, we just can't wait till everybody leave the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got our own separate part of the house, so it will be okay.
My daughter, My daughter is the youngest of the oldest three. So when she moved out, my husband's like, woohoo, I can walk around in my boxers now. And I am totally outnumbered now. Oh gosh. Yeah.
I
But
yeah, yeah, I'm female, and I got two daughters, and um a dog, a
hubby's
male dog. You don't know what he looking at.
we've even got three dogs, so and two of them are male. So I'm just
Totally, I know.
yeah.
But I just feel like when husbands and wives need to get together and talk about things, and what do you do if there's a particular thing that you want done? I'm talking sex, of course, but
Mhm.
the other person doesn't feel comfortable with doing it. How do you handle that?
Comes down to communication.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I mean, if it's just an act, then there's going to be a wall put up and
Yeah.
hostility created. If
Hmm.
there's a
Right.
relationship there and there's true care, then both sides are going to
Mhm.
find some meeting in the middle that's going to
Yeah,
make both people happy with respect. I mean, it
yeah.
comes down to the communication, the care. There's all those aspects have to come together.
Hmm.
If it's not, then real issues are going to arise.
Yeah,
Oh, sure.
you don't want to make someone do something that they don't feel comfortable with doing. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Now, if it's that's going to be a really big problem if it's just regular
Yeah.
missionary vaginal sex and you don't want to do it. Then we got big problems.
Yeah.
Right. Mm.
But I'm talking about other things,
Sure.
fellatio,
Right.
whatever. Some people don't always feel comfortable with certain positions, certain things. Maybe you can sit down and talk about it, have a happy medium that both people feel comfortable with doing. And you never should make someone or force someone to do something they don't
No, no.
want to do.
Mm-mm.
I don't
But then
agree
that
with that.
comes back down to the communication. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay, so you don't
The
like that,
why.
then why? Oh, it
yeah,
might
Why.
be smell, it might be taste, it may be time of the month, it may be there's a whole list of things. Okay, well
And
then when would it be okay? And
mm,
then we can come together, okay, during this part of or
yeah,
mhm.
if situations were
yeah,
this, then it
yeah,
would be. And then my expectations are I don't expect it when you are not okay with it, but when
yeah.
that time
That's
comes
it.
where
Right.
you're okay with it, then we can have the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
And you
Well,
just,
and I think you have to take into account someone's perhaps traumatic history too.
yeah,
I
it might have
mean,
been something that happened. Yeah.
yeah, it may not even be preferences, it may be something like that. And
Yeah.
that's where the communication and the being sensitive to the other person's uh wants, needs, but the reasons why.
Yeah, exactly. I think why is very key. And maybe
Mhm.
there could be some counseling or something to get
Mhm.
rid of that blockage
Mhm.
there. Unfortunately.
Always the working on it then,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Yeah.
meeting in the middle somehow,
yeah. 'Cause some people have been inappropriately touched as a young
Mhm.
child, or maybe they
Sure.
were sexually abused or something happened,
Mhm.
and they
Right.
they might be a little bit more frigid when it comes to certain things. And even if they're not married or in a relationship, people that has happened to really need counseling, really
Right.
need help to heal
Sure.
before getting into a relationship, because that will hurt a relationship depending on
Mhm.
how sensitive and caring and loving the other person is who you're telling this to, because some people don't want to deal with it. I'm like, they just might leave.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, we
Right.
got people that are like that. But I just thought I'd bring that up because, some people have different expectations.
Mhm.
As we just talked about, if you've had sexual relations prior to marriage, you might have been freaky and you
Yeah.
did a lot. And this person might be, just not exposed to a lot. So, like you said,
Mhm.
Derek, communication is going to come in. And what are you okay with doing? Are you okay with this? Are you okay with this? But you got to have people that love each other and are
Oh,
willing to,
right.
you know, have that conversation, have that happy medium, and not be selfish.
Mhm.
Some people can be
Yeah.
selfish. They want what they want, how they want it, how often they want it, and how you feel about, I don't care what you're dealing with. We married now. You better deal with it and do it how I want it done. And that's
Yeah.
unfortunate. I would hope no
Yeah.
one's in a relationship like that, but someone is,
And that's
unfortunately.
Yeah.
where it's not there's the lines of dictatorship to partnership and how that marriage is formed. And I mean there
Mhm.
that is multi-layer layers deep. Like it
Oh
can
yeah.
go from how you were raised with your parents, if it was a one parent
Mhm.
household, if there was divorce, like where are you seeing what a marriage is supposed to be? What are you seeing
Mhm.
what a sex life is supposed to be? What are you seeing what a parent is supposed to like? All those things before you even come into a marriage helps form your marriage, and then you make it your own. Well, if you're not communicating, if you saw something unhealthy and you've got all these things in your head that are not making it healthy, you've got to work through that to even have a remote chance of having something that's healthy.
Wow.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. I remember, this is a little story. I remember being a teenager, and the expectation still was, of course, sex after marriage, even though I had two sisters,
Yeah, that didn't wait.
that didn't wait. And about that time, it was around that time that my dad got remarried. And so the bathroom wall shared in their bedroom shared a wall. There was one bathroom in the small ranch house. And they didn't care who was home either, let's just say.
Oh,
And so I'd be banging it. I'd just go in and I'd start banging on the bathroom wall because I was just like, I don't know. It was at that point where it was like, ooh, ew.
did you hear? You heard?
Yes, because I could hear them. And then my stepmom would come out and just like, what was all that noise? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And finally, she just came up to me one time and she's like, it's just love making, Renee. I'm like, yeah, but I don't need to hear it.
No, when I mentioned before, I don't care who's in the house. No one can
Right,
hear us.
right,
No one can
right,
hear what we're doing because I
right.
would not want that to be heard. That is like, you know,
Yeah,
that's our moment
right.
there.
Yeah.
Oh wow, how crazy! So yeah,
Uh-huh.
this sex is something that you want to share with someone you're in love with. The idea would be marriage, of
Mhm.
course. But what do you think today with people who are so they don't wait? Just let's be honest, most people don't
All
wait to
right.
marriage today. What do you feel like is the number one or one of the top things that they run into in having sex with multiple people other than disease and pregnancy?
All right, if as if those aren't right, bad enough.
That's bad enough. That's really bad.
Uh, well, uh, well, they're starting so young,
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
They're starting so young in middle school. I mean, how I don't even know how young they teach sex ed now because kids start so young.
Hmm.
And I just think that I don't know whether it's such a good thing for them to be taught so young because not everybody sitting in that classroom is at the same emotional maturity
Hmm.
and where they'll go from there with that knowledge.
Hmm.
you know I like the idea of parents in general having much more control over their child's
Absolutely.
education, including sexual
Absolutely.
education, um and also being able to pass on then their if they have religious beliefs about it and whatever. But
Hmm.
I just think, especially in the vein of starting so early like they do nowadays and the multiple partners, I think it really can mess up their emotions. I have a child who has only had one girlfriend
Hmm.
ever
Hmm.
for and they were together for 3 years. Um and he's 29 years old
Mm. Wow.
and not interested, because of the way that went,
Oh,
not interested in marriage,
wow.
not and he says that's there's trust issues and
Mm.
she so I mean, I feel like, well, maybe if your relationship kind of didn't go the way it did, the choices that you guys made, maybe you wouldn't necessarily feel that way at 29, you
Yeah,
know?
maybe he can get some help with that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not every woman is the same, and
No.
and
Right.
and we grow and mature. Maybe you were
Yep.
less mature back then.
Yep.
Yeah,
Well, boys, right?
yeah, yeah,
Boys versus girls too.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So I
Mhm.
think he definitely needs some help and counseling with that, so
Mhm.
he can heal, so he won't think that it's going to be that way with everybody. You know what I mean?
Right.
Sometimes
Right.
people face
Yeah.
that when they have been in a bad marriage. You know, I've
Sure.
never been
Sure.
married before, but my husband was married before, and he was like, he wasn't going to get married again. He was done. He's like, I am
Yeah.
done. And then we reconnected. We knew each other from high school, but we reconnected years later, and I given my life to the Lord. I was a different person. I got saved, and he said that he could really trust me. He said that he could really tell that he could really, really trust me. He said, if I didn't trust you, I wasn't doing this sugar honey iced tea again. He said, I really trust you. And he's very grateful to have me, and we're thankful to have each other. So it
Yes.
doesn't mean it's going to be the same way the next time. You just learn from the mistakes you made in
Yep.
previous relationships. Because sometimes people get married before they're even fully grown. Like you said, you were
Sure.
19. Sometimes,
Yeah.
you're just not
Yeah. Yep.
emotionally there.
Well, we had been dating for 3 years, but I mean,
Yeah.
and sex was not an issue, but it was still immaturity, on
Yeah.
both of our I was 19, he was 22,
Mhm,
We
mhm,
didn't bring children into
mhm,
the mix
mhm,
for 4 years,
mhm,
so I think that was a good thing, um, as well, just because, being so young and trying to navigate,
mhm.
marriage already, but then once we did have children, it was boom, boom, boom. So they're all real close in age. It turns out that they're the same, pretty much the same spacing as my sisters and I.
Mhm.
So, and we had
Okay.
a great time as kids. So,
Yeah, yeah. So, I know I brought up about being married before. Do you guys, and I know we're talking about sex, and I guess I'm gonna switch gears a little bit, but have you guys had any issues with the previous spouses?
issues with them how?
I don't know, any kind of
Oh yes, only
No
because we had.
issues. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, everything is fine now, though.
Okay. Yeah.
We live out of state from each other.
Uh-huh.
Um, he got remarried a year after I did. Um, but when there was children and child support
Yeah, all that kind of stuff.
involved, yeah, I had to kind of put my foot down and say, you know what, these are our children.
Mm-hmm.
You're you are sick. You get like 6 days a month,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that you
Mm-hmm.
see them. So I don't want to. Don't call me. I got to. Don't call me. Don't email me. Don't text me.
Uh-huh.
Don't anything.
Uh,
They're the children are his and mine. It had. I
so
mean,
you never had any issues with him trying to get back with you or anything like that, right?
oh well, that is what part of what drug out the divorce.
Oh, okay. Mm.
Yeah, he used every religious way he could.
Oh my
Every
goodness.
9/11 happened. He used that.
Okay.
Like
Oh.
I was.
Mhm.
He I had never had a job, so he tried everything to keep friends and family from babysitting, so I wouldn't be able to work. Oh yeah,
Oh
yeah.
wow.
Hmm.
Oh
He
yeah.
was a mess. What about
And
you,
I'm like,
Eric?
I'm gonna go back when you act like that.
I know, right? All the more reason why we're not together.
Yeah.
Okay, what will you say to that, Derek? Did your ex? Oh, you said you were married before, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was not to get back together. It was she used the kid as a weapon for a while, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
to me, the biggest challenge was not letting anybody know about it because the last thing I wanted was my daughter to feel that, and so
Right.
that was the hardest thing. Was I saw
Mhm.
her every other weekend, and they lived in Dallas, and I was in Wichita, Kansas, so it was a 6-hour drive
Oh.
for me to go see her every other
Oh.
week.
Oh.
But it's kind of like sex and marriage and everything else in your life. If you make it a priority, they're gonna know it's a priority and they're gonna know that they're important to you. So that was never missed.
Yeah.
And then she had some decisions that changed her life situation, and About 3 years in, I got a phone call saying, if you don't come pick her up, we're going to have, we don't know where we're going to be living. And I was like, okay. So I went and
Oh,
picked her up. I made the 6 hour drive in under 4 hours, picked her up. And part of it was I wanted to go get her. The other part was I don't want to give her any chance to change her mind. So
yeah.
I went and picked up my daughter, and she was with us ever since that day.
Wow.
So,
Mhm.
um,
Mm.
but yeah, it it made it a challenge. But at the same time, I also know that when you have a kid with somebody, your relationship or lack thereof is on the back burner because you have to do like I understand some people stay together for their kids, and I wasn't doing that, but at the same time, I still have to be respectful for my kid,
Yes, of
Oh,
course.
yeah. Hmm.
Absolutely.
and that's
Absolutely.
not easy to do either.
Mhm, mhm.
Hmm.
So as
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, Renee, you were going to say something?
No, I was just thinking how many times I had to remind my husband of that, co-parenting
Yeah.
agreement that was on paper, you know,
Yes,
and
exactly.
how, and to be respectful of,
Mhm.
the children always had to be ready to go with the other parent and ready to be brought back,
Exactly.
everything, and not to be speaking ill of the other parent in front of the
Absolutely.
child. And
Absolutely. That's,
so,
yeah, you got to do it mature, the mature way.
well, I think that affects how they feel about their future relationships
Exactly.
too.
Yeah,
Because, I mean, they say girls marry somebody like their father and boys marry somebody like their mother. I mean, not exactly, but obviously it has a influence on them. And if
Right.
you're going to just speak ill of their own, other parent,
Mhm.
just because things didn't work out between the two of you for whatever reason,
Mhm.
that
Yes.
that's an unfair burden to put on your children, for
Absolutely.
their
I
for
totally
their
agree.
it's an
future.
unfair burden, but it's also an unfair expectation that you're
Yeah,
creating for that
Yeah.
for their own relationships down the road. As though if
exactly,
my dad
exactly.
was an a-hole, then the person I'm going to marry is going to be one. So I might as well just accept the first a-hole that comes around.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's terrible. Yeah.
right, right.
Wow. Wow. I
Mhm.
as we close out, I just want to ask each of you, and I want you to really tell me, what advice would you give young people who are considering having sex before marriage? Like they're really considering it, haven't done it yet. So I'll start with you, Renee.
We're presuming they're in a relationship
Relationship. They're in a
at a
relationship. Yes.
that's gotten to that
Yes, that
point.
point.
Um, well, uh, uh, I'm thinking, this isn't my personal opinion, but some people feel, that what actually is sex? Are we talking just intercourse, or are we talking all the other things? And so some of them may be engaging in that, but just not, you know
Intercourse. Mhm,
exactly. And
mhm.
so they think everything is, uh you know fine, and that may actually carry them through until not actually having intercourse till they're married. I don't know that I would advise even that,
Mhm.
because I um so many kids nowadays don't consider any of those things, and they're kind of taught that isn't what sex is, that
Mm,
those things are not sex. They
mhm,
might be they don't even consider them sexual acts. They're
mm,
just, you know so yeah, I don't I would encourage them to not, um
mhm,
yeah, just to not even get involved physically like
mhm,
that. I mean, kissing, hugging, you
mhm.
know,
Yeah,
being close, no spending the night necessarily.
yeah.
I think that's a big temptation.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and I think because of all of the sexual things that are just out
yes.
there, is in
Mhm.
movies, even with teenagers.
Yep.
In TV shows, movies, they're trying to have sex. It's just everywhere. It's just proliferated. And so the expectation is you're not cool unless you do it. My advice would be to really talk to somebody, really,
Yep.
really consider about what you're giving up, and you're going
Mhm.
to feel not in a good way, especially if you're female, because I feel like we're more emotionally connected to sex than men are. I feel like
Mhm.
they disconnect more. We talked about earlier the anatomy. I feel
Mhm.
like, if it doesn't work out, this could leave a person in a devastatingly emotional place.
Right.
And if they're already not mature in the
Mhm.
first place,
Mhm.
they might just do the unthinkable because they are so upset. It could be a
Mhm.
guy that had sex with you, said he loved you, then turn around and say, I didn't mean it. I think you're ugly, and that could
Yeah.
really hurt to
Mhm.
a huge degree. We have to really, I suggest young people talk to someone that you
Yeah.
trust, that you know,
Yep.
and look at their life. If their life is a
Yeah.
mess, don't talk to them. Talk to
Yeah.
someone who's got their head screwed on straight, about how you're feeling and what you should be doing. Um,
Right.
yeah, I really feel like that is necessary, and don't be in any kind of rush to give yourself completely to someone, because what if it doesn't work out and you're left in shambles? And remember,
Right.
you're already emotional and immature.
Yep. Right.
So really think about that before you do it. So what do you say? Advice would you give to young people in a relationship where they're considering having sex, Derek?
Man, so it's one of those things. It's like, are you really ready to start making grown decisions?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Because when you start making those decisions, you get grown up decisions equals grown up consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And as you're starting to make more and more grown up decisions, like let's worry about if you want to start driving a car
Mm-hmm.
and worrying about a car payment before we start worrying
Mhm.
about all the other things that come with the emotional and mental challenges that come with giving yourself to someone else.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and when you feel that's what you want to do, then remove emotion from it, give it a few days, and if you still feel that way, then I mean, I'm not going to live that life for you. I
Right.
think that when you start removing the emotions, it's also setting yourself up for success. So, like, if you have in your mentality that I'm waiting until I'm married, then put up
Mhm.
safeguards to prevent that from happening. Don't put yourself in a
Mhm.
situation where you're alone with somebody. Don't be even in the basement of a parent's house watching a movie if you think it's going to
Mhm.
lead to that. Don't have the one blanket to share. Have separate, like it. You can set up yourself with blocks where if you
Yep.
cross the line, you realize you've crossed the line, and it's intentional to keep going, or it's intentional to go back the other
To
way.
stop. Mhm.
And so if you're not thinking it out of the what if and making sure that there's stops to prevent it from happening, once it does happen,
Mhm.
you can't undo something like that.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's usually doesn't just happen once, right? It's
Yes.
not like,
No. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Once it
exactly.
starts to happen, it's yeah.
Wow.
And it's not just that with that relationship, it carries
Right.
forward to future
Yep.
ones.
Yes. Yes.
And honestly, I think it makes it easier to cross that line after that
Mhm.
Oh, for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh,
with the
absolutely.
with the next relationships. Mhm.
Absolutely. And I was looking at a video before I joined the call here, before we got on this call, and it was a young woman who said that having sex before marriage destroyed her mental health.
Oh.
Yeah, she said it destroyed her mental health because she was always worried about, if he's done this with me, how many other girls has he done this with? And does
Oh.
he really care about me the way he says he does? All these what ifs kept coming to her mind. And she said sex before marriage literally destroyed her mental health.
Yeah.
That is why it is so very important that people look at it. It's not just having a good time. We're only going to do it once, no big deal. It is a
Mhm.
big deal.
Mhm.
That's why I believe God has it set forth that we should wait until marriage, because,
Mhm.
and prayerfully you get married to someone that loves you and is going to do right, because just having sex, in a relationship, it didn't work out, then you're thinking maybe it wasn't good enough. Was I good enough at doing it? It's a whole bunch of can of
Mhm.
worms that gets opened.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I
Well,
Yeah.
and
can
without turning it into a commodity thing, also, it's
Mhm.
the men don't want something they may say that they do, But
Mhm.
when it's somebody that they want to commit to for the rest of their life, they're not
Yeah.
going to somebody who's been passed around multiple times.
Yes, that's
And
true.
so it comes back to self-esteem, self-confidence, but
Mhm.
also it, you have to have the mentality of, do I want to be what's okay and normal with society and accepted right now?
Mhm.
Knowing that the rest of my life could also be, I'm limited in my income. I'm not like my value to a potential spouse just isn't there. Um,
Mhm.
there's multiple facets to, once you start to go down that road, your
Mhm.
the ceiling in which your life could be slowly gets lower too. And
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
everybody should reach for as big a dreams as you have. But once you
Right.
start crushing those dreams yourself because of the grown-up decisions you're making, now the life you could have had is totally different than the way it should have ended up.
Yep.
Wow. Think about
Yep.
that. Any young person who might be might come across this video, or might be an
Mhm.
adult who, who is not married, who's thinking about doing this. We have to consider everything. It is not as simple as they make it seem in the media.
No.
It's
Oh
really,
gosh,
they make
no.
it seem like it's a good time. They got the beautiful romantic music playing. And in real life, it doesn't really happen that way. So we just can't let this romanticized view of sex just
Mhm.
overtake us, because it can bring with it a lot of things. And a lot of times young people simply aren't emotionally stable or mature enough to
Yep.
handle it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And there's a difference between being romantic
Mhm,
and a certain kind of intimacy
mhm,
that has absolutely nothing to do with anything sexual. You
mhm,
know, there's the bringing the flowers and the opening the door and the gifts, and not just, I mean, not just from, men to women
mhm.
or young men to young women, but the other way around too, um, that that I think helps build proper um, levels of intimacy,
Mhm.
as you emotionally grow too.
Exactly. Wow. Well, that's all I have for today. Did anyone want to, Derek, did you want to give any closing comments? And Renee, if you have anything else, you can as well.
The biggest thing is, you are special,
Hmm.
and you
Mhm.
start to lose your uniqueness, your specialty in the world when you start sharing it with everybody and letting them have a piece of you.
Yep.
Hmm.
So be very prideful in yourself. Be very very reserved in who you're willing to give that to. Make them
Mhm.
know that it's a special thing you're giving, and when
That's
you do
right.
it, make sure that you know that you've made that conscious choice and you're not just giving it away, because that's something that you should be clinging to yourself. So that's the biggest thing I've got, and that's not just for this topic, it's about everything.
Everything.
Oh, sure.
Your time is important, your money's
Mhm.
important, your spirituality is important. Every aspect of life is important, and the more you give it to, the less important. If everybody has access to it, then it's
What's
really
it
not
worth?
that important, not that
Right.
special. So make the value, you're in control of your own value by who you give it to.
Wow.
Mhm.
And what do you say, Renee? Did you want to top it
Um,
off?
well, building off of what he said too, that I think um, that occurs even when you are in a relationship that that is marriage.
Hmm.
It still can't be taken for granted. It still
Absolutely.
can't. It still has to be um, seen as something special,
Hmm.
and you are joining together,
Hmm.
you know, to as as a couple. It can bind a couple real well, and get you some through some really hard times sometimes too.
Hmm.
And like he said, the ceiling then is yours to together
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
to just keep climbing, and you haven't limited either one of yourselves.
That's great. That's great. Well, wow, you guys have given some great advice, some great
Mhm.
comments. Thank you so much for joining me on my
Well,
show
thank you.
today. You guys have a great one. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
All right, great conversation. All right. Sex, how important is it in a relationship? I hope you guys really learned from my panel. There YouTube channels will be in the description box below. Thank you so much for joining, and until next time.